Hello everyone, today we are gonna be playing the Axe Bearer or the Rock Guy or whatever you wanna call him. Anyway, let's get into the games. And here we go, our first game against player 1 playing a stall deck. And of course I'm playing the new Rock Guy. We are going to quickly go over the abilities of the Rock Guy here at the beginning, and after that we are just going to concentrate on the games themselves and how you can play this guy. Firstly, normal attack is a normal attack, and of course this is a monster card. Geo 12 HP, of course 12 HP is the one reason why this guy is worth anything, and why... There we go. Elemental skill. Only 3 geo damage, nothing tied to it, very simple, nothing special. The burst on the other hand is special. You perform geo application on self and you prepare a great axe strike and then a master strike. Basically it is a prepare skill, 2 prepare skills, so you do not instantaneously deal damage with the burst. Instead you do 2 instances, both with 3 damage. Let's quickly go over the dice rolls here. So the notable part about the burst, because it's 2 instances of damage, whatever damage increase you are using, be it Shilonen's damage buff, be it Guro's damage buff, be it Furina's damage buff, or be it the Rock Bearer's own passive skill damage buff, it gets applied to both instances of damage. So the burst without any buff is 6 damage, and if you have, for example, Shilonen's buff, the burst gets turned into 8 damage. And the burst is the strongest attack the Rock Bearer has. For this very reason, it is 2 instances of damage, both can be buffed, and of course you do, for 3 dice, the base damage is 6, which is very good for a 2 energy cost burst. Then the Rock Guy's passive skill, this is like the thing that makes Rock Guy special. If the opponent has damage negation or shield, character or team status, that is if they have, for example, a Millilet, or they have Sidlali's shield, any manner of any kind of shield or any kind of damage reduction, after you do a skill with any of your characters, Rock Guy gets 1 stack of Might of Stone. What does Might of Stone do? Your character deals +1 damage for the next instance of damage. That means if you have only 1 stack of Might of Stone and you use the burst, the first part will do 4 damage and the second part only 3 damage. So what you want to do with the Rock Guy, you want to stack the Might of Stone a few times, so you do increased damage with your attacks. And that is the best way to play the Rock Guy in my opinion. And the Might of Stone has the special deal when, if the opposing character is under a shield or damage reduction, the opposing active character. So if in this case, if Rock Guy had the Might of Stone and Furina, for example, had Tenacity of Millilet, attacking Furina with the Tenacity shield would have the Might of Stone give +3 damage instead of the +1. So you get the +1 every time you have Might of Stone. You get +3 if the opponent is under a shield. And quickly here, even though we come back to this later in the video, the talent card. When it's played, it is a combat action, meaning immediately after playing this card, as I was saying, immediately after playing this, it switches to the opponent's turn, and when you play this, the Rock Guy gets Geo application, and at the start of each round, Rock Guy gets Geo application. Basically it is a self-cleanse, because of course it is Geo, it can cleanse anything except Dendro. So a very good talent card, and this talent card is basically the make or break against certain matchups with the rock guy. Anyway, let's let the game go on and we'll see the abilities, mostly the passive skill here, activate a few times.
Witness my magnificence!
Actually, quickly here at the beginning, the reason why I started with Rock Guy, Geo Guy, whatever, I'm gonna be changing the name often here, was because I was expecting my opponent to start with Sidlali and I was hoping to immediately cleanse the Cryo from Sidlali's skill, but in this case they only did a normal attack, so I kind of wasted my dice switching around. And there you see my opponent had a shield actually given to them by the talent card, but doing a skill with Furina gave a Might of Stone to the rock guy. And that's actually quickly, let's go over why do I have Furina, why do I have Siloden. Both have damage buffs, and like mentioned, any sort of damage buff with the rock guy's burst is very strong. And both Siloden's skill and Furina's skill deal no damage to the opponent, meaning that when you do them, it is very easy to get stacks, Might of Stone stacks for the rock guy when the opponent has any sort of shield or damage reduction. Also, in this deck, we are running a bunch of, we are running Tenshukaku, we are running Paimon, we are running all sorts of very simple extra dice cards, because I came to the conclusion that rock guy is best used in a very simple manner, and that is get so much dice that you can just spam your skills when you have Siloden's damage buff or a few stacks of Furina's burst damage buff up and running, and you just do a bunch of attacks in one round. I thought it worked, and as you are going to see in this replays, it actually does work quite well. Also there, you can see we did quite a lot of damage to... Hold on, we need to... There. We did a total of 4 damage because of the Might of Stone damage increasing our damage by +3. So even though they had crystallized, even though they have had the Opal Shield, Nuvilliet still took 4 damage because the Geo rock guy had the Might of Stone deal +3 because the opponent was shielded, in this case by the Opal Shield. And actually here we are going to see the talent card is going to cleanse that Hydro of rock guy, and that's actually part of the reason in this deck I have nothing to counter freeze except rock guy's talent card. And it is very good, like you don't need to run, for example, Edict of Absolution. Like this deck, we are relying on one character to win the game. If this one character gets, for example, frozen, all we can really do to avoid being frozen is to play the talent card. Like, I don't feel you need any sort of Edict of Absolution that does to counter freeze, like just well-timed talent card. Of course, then you are expected to actually get the talent card. Also here, you can see our attack. Our attack with Furina's burst broke all of the shields, but the rock guy still got a Might of Stone stack, even though, like, for example, Sidlali's shield didn't come back. So how the Might of Stone actually works, you get a stack even when you break the opponent's shields with the skill. So as long as the opponent has shields or damage reduction, you do any skill, even if the skill breaks the shield, you will get that 1 stack of Might of Stone. Of course, in matchups where the opponent isn't running any sort of shielding or damage reduction, in those matchups, it becomes very important. Like if you want to, well, let me put it this way: with Rokai in general, against teams with no shields or damage reduction, you want to play around the talent card, giving them shields and then stacking the Might of Stone. But if you are running like a deck like mine, you can just stack Furina's and Shilonen's damage buffs together and use that instead of trying to get the Might of Stone stacks. The basics with the Rokai is, if your opponent is using shields, you want to get Might of Stone for the +3 damage. If your opponent is not playing shields or damage reduction, just whenever I say shields, consider I'm also talking about damage reduction. So if your opponent is running shields or damage reduction, you want to stack Might of Stone. If they are not running shields, then you want to get Shilonen's and or Furina's burst. Shilonen's damage buff from the skill and Furina's damage buff from the burst to get Rokai to actually deal damage. Alternatively, by the way, with this deck you could absolutely use Goro instead of Shilonen, but like said, I'm using Shilonen for the combined damage buff and the skill that does not deal damage, so we get the Might of Stone stacks easier, because we are not gonna be breaking the opponent's shields so often. And this is, by the way, the essence of my deck. Just stack up a bunch of dice for one round, get Shilonen's damage buff and win the game in that round, or at least deal so much damage that the opponent can no longer recover. That is the essence of my deck. As per usual, I will cover the game plan in greater detail in later games, but in this first one we are against a star deck, so this will actually take a while.
Time to end them!
Of course, swap stalling here, having my opponent spend all of their dice. For a star player, they are making that mistake. And of course I use the talent card here to cleanse the cryo to make sure that there's no way for Nublia to suddenly freeze. And that's, by the way, what I was talking about with the use of the talent card to counter freeze. So you see here, my opponent is protected by a shield and we have a bunch of damage stacks, so we are gonna be dealing quite big numbers. Also, quick mention. The burst is kind of funny, like how it works. If the opponent already has a shield, like in this case, using the burst gives you one stack of the Might of Stone. If you use the burst and the opponent doesn't have a shield, of course you do shield or damage reduction. If you use the burst and the opponent has neither, you don't get a Might of Stone stack. If you use the burst and your because the burst gives you geo application, if the geo application gives your opponent a shield, you actually do not get a Might of Stone stack from using the burst. That's something you need to consider. Like if you are expecting for the, because oh yeah, you are going to do a geo application, the opponent is going to get a shield, so you get the Might of Stone and +3 damage. No, you will not get Might of Stone. So the shield you give your opponent with this geo application from the burst will not give you a Might of Stone stack. That's something to keep in mind. I mean, I'm hoping it gets changed, because the burst would be much better if the geo application, the crystallize shield that the opponent gets from it, actually would also give you the Might of Stone, because you are doing a skill, or in this case you are preparing a skill. And also a quick mention, the follow-up attacks.
Below.
Only when you click the skill is there a possibility to get a Might of Stone stack. The follow-up prepares do not give you a Might of Stone even if the opponent has damage reduction or shields at play. Only when you first initialize the prepare skill for the Great Axe Strike, only that part can give you Might of Stone. But yes, that's probably all of the finer details. Like mentioned, burst is the best part because it's so much damage for only 3 dice, and because you can easily increase its damage quite a lot. Of course, unfortunately, in this game we are just a bit off from winning the game this round, so it will go on for another round, or actually possibly even 2 if... No, this wasn't that match, right? No, they already played their arcane. This isn't the one match where my opponent played a fight for the death, having only one character alive and survived yet another round. But anyway, I think I deal a burst here and I follow that up with a normal attack, and that wins me the game. Surprise to no one. Well, I'll go over the game plan of this deck in the next game as per usual, and well, I'll see you there.
When the tide comes in, I shall return.
Now in this next game we are against a summon deck. And of course the difficult, I believe this matchup, my opponent actually isn't running shields or damage negation. You can see their characters, none of these characters have a way to form shields or give damage reduction. So we are basically hoping that they are running either tenacity artifacts, or they'll use a bunch of food cards that give you damage reduction. Of course, if neither of those happen, we are simply going to go for Furina Burst or Silonen skill to buff. Which is, by the way, like I mentioned in that first game, if you are against the characters that actually generate, like for example, if I'm against Noel, start with Rock Bear and just spam the skill, because each time they create a shield, it just gives you the Might of Stone and gives you increased damage. Alright. If you are not against the shield generating characters, stack up on those dice, as I do here. And this is like the core of my game plan here. You get at least 1 damage reduction with Furina and Silonen, and you stack up a bunch of dice, so much so that you can do so many skills in one round that your opponent simply has to lose 1 or 2 characters most often if you've done proper preparing.
Strike a pose.
In this case, I go to Rokkai, hoping that they here would play Xiangling's talent card. They do not. I was of course hoping to play the Rokkai's talent card, so instead I'm simply collecting Rokkai's burst for the future. And of course my opponent is running quite a good summon combo. This combo right here deals exactly 10 damage when Salon members activates twice. A very strong summon combo. Of course, in this matchup all of my characters are 12 HP, meaning this combo is simply not enough. Not to mention I have Furina to heal, so that after the 10 damage is taken, my character isn't even in a normal attack range. You can see I have just enough HP that my opponent has to play some sort of extra damage to actually take out Shilonen. Here I actually want to get Shilonen's skill, the damage buff for the following round, so we play the Geo Resonance and follow it up with a normal attack. And of course, because the only thing I can use for tanking or getting more dice for the following round is to play the Sing Your Heart Out, but instead of that I actually go for Furina's Burst. So since all of these summons and my healing summon is going to give me quite a few stacks. And this is the game plan you want to do against decks that do not run shields or damage negation. You want to get, well, depending on how aggressive your opponent is. In this game I'm against a summon deck, so I can go for the double buffs. But if you are against a very aggressive deck, which, well, we are not going to see very aggressive decks in today's video, but we are going to see some more aggressive ones. Against those very aggressive decks you want to simply get Shilonen's skill and a bunch of dice. And if possible, already round 2, try to go for a Rock Bearer skill. Well, a Rock Guy kill, to be more precise. Now the burst we've collected earlier comes in handy, since one burst is going to be enough to take out GG here. Like so. Of course, we simply follow this up with more and more attacks, and my opponent realizes they are screwed and give up. Let's get into the next game. Now in this match we have a slightly more aggressive deck from our opponent. Of course, it only really deals big damage once they have the Jansan Burst up and running, but until then my opponent's deck has rather low DPS. Especially considering we have Furina Summon and all 12 HP characters, so whatever tickling they do before Jansan Burst is something we can simply disregard as pointless noise. The same game plan, of course. If I had, for example, Rock Bearer's talent card in those matchups, it's completely fine to start with the Rock Guy and play the talent card, especially if your opponent starts first in a match like this. Had my opponent started first, had I had Rock Guy's talent card, I would have started with Rock Guy, let Jansan strike Rock Guy, play the talent card, give them the shield, but following that would every skill from Furina Shilonen would have given you the Might of Stone stack, so depending on how aggressive your opponent is, if they are of course playing something like double pyro with the what is the lightning rod guy, thunder manifestation for example, because in those cases Rock Guy would take a bit too much damage. It would be too unsafe to actually go for a one round sweep with low HP characters in those scenarios, but most of the time you are not gonna be running into decks like that. They are quite out of fashion these days. And here you can see we are going for the Rock Guy because we know my opponent is going to go for the Sidlali skill and possibly following up with Lan Yan. Of course now they have no way of having enough dice.
I knew you'd miss me.
I could have gone for a skill or a normal attack plus the burst, but I decide to instead stack up on the Might of Stone, since both Sidlali and Lan Yan do create shields, so it's actually better to have a bunch of stacks of Might of Stone to get rid of those shields. Also this way we get the Golden Droop value. Now the game starts to actually pick up the pace. My opponent now with Jansen's damage buffs and the bunch of shields they are collecting up against other decks that would be quite scary indeed, but in this matchup I'm actually looking quite good. And for the simple fact that my opponent hasn't really shown any sort of extra dice, like no artifacts, no nothing, I am actually going for the double buffs here. Of course I'm slightly scared of an extra, like a, what is it? What is it called? I don't remember. Gladiators. I was a little scared of gladiators, which is why I switched characters there. And then I noticed that I can actually snipe Jansen here, so I decided to do that. Had my opponent switched characters off from Jansen, I would have gone for Shilonen damage buff there instead of the Rokkai skill plus burst. Because of course now we got no value from the Golden Troop, because we stayed on the Rokkai.
Witness my magnificence.
Once again avoiding a bit of damage here with the switches. We want the Rokkai to stay alive a little bit longer to break all of those shields.
Oh, brilliant.
And of course here we refresh the skill to get more Might of Stone. Of course it is looking quite scary for me here, but luckily I get my Arcane card, so there's actually no fear of getting wiped out here. Not to mention the Furina summon giving us a bit of HP to stay alive. Also here we go once again with the dice stacking. You can see Tenshukaku, Paimon and Liben there. Also quick mention about the Rokkai. Of course, because it's a combat action, you can only play this card when your active character is the Rokkai. I cannot, for example, right now play this card. I have Rokkai would have to be the active character. Of course, switching to Shilonen to avoid any swirls.
The flames have gone out.
And of course, stalling the game a bit longer. Here, I go for the talent card simply so that Lan Yan doesn't get as many shields from the skill. Because the skill from Lan Yan is the best thing my opponent can do here. You can see a good 7+1, and now they are all gone. There's only the refreshed Opal Shield and the Crystallize we gave them with the talent card. So Rokkai does not concern himself with the shields of the weak. You simply have enough dice to wipe out all sorts of opponents. And here you're gonna see Rokkai is actually very good Sidlali counter, because Sidlali gives you the Opal Shield after, well, when she has Night's Soul Blessing points and takes your active character takes damage. Sidlali giving shields is actually a bad thing for my opponent, because it means I get the +3 attack instead of the +1. Anyway, on to the next game. Now, in this game you get to see the importance of Rokkai's talent card. All of the losses I've had with Rokkai have been against decks such as my opponents, where a very simple combo like Mona skill onto Kave to get blooms, or for example Nilo blooms. All of my losses with this deck have actually been, well, let's actually correct that, like 90% of my losses, because of course there are a few exceptions. 90% of my losses have been against decks like my opponents, where the talent card is very important to get in your starting hand, And whenever I lose, I have not gotten the talent card in my starting hand. But in this game you get to see the importance. If you're running against any sort of simple combo deck like my opponent, like Mona to Kave, very simple combo, very predictable, but unfortunately very strong also. But because I have the Rokkai's talent card, I can simply cleanse the Hydro.
Witness my magnificence!
Of course, because how the Rokkai's talent card works, we actually want to end our round on Rokkai to cleanse the summon Hydro as well. Of course, unfortunately, this means we cannot proc Liben, which is of course a little unfortunate. But considering we deny my opponent all blooms, this display is much more important. Also, I could give a quick mention here. Even though the Might of Stone against characters with shield gives you a +3 damage, if you, for example, give your opponent a shield by playing the talent card, and you, for example, give your opponent a crystallized shield with that, it actually isn't that meaningful, because actually you only get +1 damage compared to the opponent having no shields at all. To explain what I mean, if the opponent doesn't have shields, you have Might of Stone, you deal +1 damage. If you use the talent card to give your opponent a shield, you deal +3 damage, but now you've given your opponent a shield point, meaning that out of those +3, 1 is immediately negated by the fact that you've given your opponent a shield point. So using the talent card to give your opponent a shield for the Might of Stone to deal more damage, it only gives you +1 total damage. Like compared to having only the Might of Stone buff, the simple version, the +1 version. So when you are doing damage calculations to, for example, snipe the opponent's characters, you need to consider that if you play the talent card to give them a shield, it is actually only a +1 damage, because you give them the shield, which negates one of the increased attack, by the increased damage effect. That's just something like when you are counting how to kill your opponent efficiently. You need to remember that there's actually something like that going on. Going for the Furina burst as per usual. Of course, in this game my opponent is using Tenacity. They have Mona skill that gives damage reduction. They have Xingqiu skill that gives damage reduction. All of which can be used to counter or to get Might of Stone stacks. Of course, my opponent getting very lucky with the Guardian's Oath, Shao card discard, with the Kave being at the map. I mean, 5 cost cards are the maximum damage Kave blooms can currently deal, but opponent getting really lucky there. Of course, that is the reason why I played the Geo Resonance, because I was afraid that my opponent would be running cards like that for the Kave to deal a bunch of damage. Of course, also in this matchup, even though I have the extra dice, my opponent running double Storm Terrors, double Laboratory on the field. By the way, another 4 cost card. My opponent is getting really lucky. I don't actually have that big of a dice lead in a match like this.
Is it time to go?
I don't want to take the Mona burst damage on Serpent. Well, Rokkai Black Serpent Knight. The name is way too long. And of course, it's less dice to switch characters than to, for example, Furina's skill there again. So we switch to Shilonen to tank the Mona burst there. Snipe Mona out of the game. Go for the Rokkai burst here. Like so. Of course, we don't do quite enough damage to take out Kave here. So we end our round on Furina so that the opponent's the double damage is taken by my least my character with the least HP left. And while in this game you can see that I'm clearly on the winning side, even though my opponent right here does do some good plays. Actually, one of the losses I've had with this deck has been against the Kave Bloom. I don't think it was against Amethyst, it was another person, and they were running a different Kave deck with the Hydro Tulpa. It was actually quite a clever one. I liked the composition of that deck, how the combo my opponent did in that game was very clever. But enough about that. Like the number one reason why I lost that game was because I didn't get the Rokkai's talent card early. And it's actually one thing, like you've already seen I'm running Fight for the Death in this deck. But you could, for example, have Furina's talent card and run Stove card for the simple reason of when you get matchups like this, you have an easier time countering them. And it's not often you need to play Fight for the Death with this deck. Usually because of the strategy we employ, the massive amount of dice, you can quite often simply win by not needing to play the Fight for the Death. Taking out Xingqiu here, of course, because of the damage reduction, the Might of Stone deals the +3 damage. Now we enter the final round of this game. Of course, opponent still getting quite a good amount of dice from the laboratory ruins, even playing Fight for the Death, meaning it's quite the difficult task to take out Kave. But luckily here you can see my opponent does no longer has the ultimate active, and when they do not have the ultimate they don't get burst scans with their normal attacks, meaning that that attack right there is not immediately followed by Kave Bloom attack. Because we've seen that my opponent is running 4-cost cards, not playing the Fight for the Death at this stage was a little scary, because there's the possibility that they have some very expensive card in the deck, and actually quite a few Kave players I've seen, they like to run weapons for Kave as well. So all they needed was a weapon and a high cost card to take out the Rokkai, but they do not get anything special, so I win the game as they give up. Let's get into the last game of today. And in this last game against Shenhe, Double and Nemo, fun enough with the Dwalin. Once again in this game, you can see we do not get a Rokkai's talent card at the beginning, so here you get to see like how difficult it is against decks like this when you don't have the talent card early. Like if we had Rokkai's talent card, I would simply start with the Rokkai, play the talent card and tank all the damage Shenhe will do with the Rokkai to cleanse all of the damage. Also, what you're about to see here, I will go for a normal attack as well, I believe. Yes. I'm only going for Shilonen's damage buff round 2 because I can play the Tenshukaku for free. If it wasn't for that fact, I would have simply played Tenshukaku and not gone for Shilonen damage buff. But because I can play it for free, I went for the Shilonen damage buff. Otherwise, I would have switched back to Furina, tanked the burst from Shenhe with Furina and switched characters to Shilonen after that. And aimed for the round 3 Shilonen damage increase. But in this case, because I could play the Tenshukaku for free, I went for that whole combo.
Cryo Incarnate!
Of course, I don't want to give my opponent a freeze. No, not a freeze. A swirl, so I switch characters. And even though we have no other damage buffs, the Shilonen's buff is still quite meaningful.
Into the wind.
So it's good to go in here. Playing the Mystic Soup may be a little late, and you know, I could have played it on to Rokkai in hopes of Providence or something, but
Is it time to go?
we got the Serenity, so it tanks the damage from the Shenhe burst, so it's not wasted by any means. We only simply could have gotten more value from it. Of course, now we are in a somewhat awful scenario. I was actually expecting my opponent to go for a 5-cost skill here, but they actually simply do the 3-cost skill. So I do a Shilonen burst to get some of the cards and of course heal a bit of HP.
Manifest!
Opponent already collecting energy for another burst from Shenhe. I of course have to try and take out Shenhe before that. Of course they yoink my arcane card, which, considering I don't have the talent card for the Rokkai, is very bad, because that's my only way of actually... Like, I have Geo Resonance, I have the arcane card. That's like all the healing I have. And because of the reason that I lost the arcane card, I actually went for the Furina skill here instead of, for example, a Liben. But because I lost my arcane card, I decided the HP to tank more swirls is more important than getting a couple extra cards and dice.
Manifest!
Somewhat debating here whether to go for Furina burst or not, but in the end I decide not to. I was actually hoping to have Shenhe burst onto Rokkai, and then I would have played Singyo harder and strategize in hopes of getting the Rokkai's talent card. But they actually went for a Kazuha Swirl. Nothing wrong with that. Using the burst here, not the greatest idea, because you can see Dwalin has 4 HP. And the burst, of course, does 3+3, and I have no form of damage increases here, so the only good reason to play the burst would have been if I had played the Gamblers as well. So this one right here is a bit of a misplay. Like, if I had pre-played Gamblers before the burst, I would have threatened Kazuha as well as Dwalin with the burst, and that would have actually been a good play. But at least we do take out Dwalin, and we have enough dice to take out Kazuha, so my opponent goes to Shenhe, which was very predictable. I decide to go for extra dice instead of fishing for more cards, since I only have 11 in the deck anymore, and considering I've already lost my arcane card, there isn't like much. Like, okay, the other Geo Resonance, I think I've only played one in this game so far, would be there. Of course, bad dice with when you have double Tenshukaku is no big deal, because it only means you get the double Omni dice. Switching characters, of course, to avoid swirls.
One with nature.
And then we start fighting once again. At least the upside of not... I think my opponent played my arcane card. The upside of not having played Gamblers was the fact that we had the golden route to do a discount. Here Gamblers comes quite good, effective. Since now that we take out Shenhe, here, about what you're about to see, I could have very well just done a Rokkai skill, and in retrospect, yes, I probably should have simply just done a Rokkai skill, but what you're about to see also works out, so it isn't that big of a deal. To put it simply, I kind of forget that this thing exists. Like so. I was not expecting that to deal 3 damage, which is why, as this dice rolls are over, I was quite not expecting Shilonen to get sniped like that.
The flames!
But it doesn't matter, I got the extra damage, so I can simply just Furina burst. Of course, what I was expecting to happen there was Shilonen would survive with 1 HP, I could burst Shilonen onto the increased damage and take out Kazuha. Alternatively, of course, I luckily had the backup plan of Furina's burst, like so. But of course, had I simply just stayed on Rokkai, the summon would have taken out Rokkai and the swirl would have... Well, Rokkai would have dealt 3 damage, Kazuha would only had 2 HP and a gnome attack from Furina or Shilonen would have been enough, but it works out in the end. So, that will be all for today. I'll see you all next time.